Doris Porpiglia.
Porpiglia?
Yes.
Okay. And what was your role during the war? What was your responsibility?
Okay, I worked in the post office and mainly helping to find people who maybe they were assigned a job, and then before they got there, they got new orders that changed it, and lots of times their mail couldn't keep up with them. So it was my job to write to their COs and find out what their new job was and everything, and so
this is upon the veterans coming home, or the soldiers coming home from the war.
and some too that were just leaving, say, like a camp in Georgia, and then having to change to go to California to be shipped out. Well, maybe somewhere in between there was another city or town or camp that we had to try to keep their mail going in the same way they were.
So you're kind of responsible for everything operating smoothly in the soldiers' transition with the mail getting to them.
I hope so.
I'm sure you did great. Okay, so that's great. That's completely different than anything I've talked to anyone about so far.
I also, at one time, when I was a camp cook, they called me to one side that I had to help them out. They had stacks of papers like of this, of GIs that were going overseas, and I had to pick out all of the men who I thought had a high enough IQ for a certain job. That's all I was ever told about. I never knew what I sent these men to. But I did. I went through all their stuff, and they went, but they wouldn't take me.
Did you want to go over there?
Oh, I wanted to. You know, I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school. You know, at that age, you could do anything.
Yeah. So did you want to fight, or did you just want to kind of be closer to the action and be able to help the soldiers out? Or
Probably be over there and help the GIs out. You know, it was something that was new to me when I grew up. When I was 12 years old, the Second World War started. Then so on and so forth, and it seemed like there was always one war or another, you know. And so my great idea was to be in the military. That was my dream. And never dawned on me I should have got an education first, but they did teach me in postal work.
So you did your part, which you could do.
I did what I could, right? That's about it.
So how do you feel about the role that women play in the military today? You know, clearly times have changed a lot.
I think it's great. If a woman wants to go, they should be allowed to go. But sometimes I sort of hold my breath when I see, like, a mother leaving her kids. That, I'm not sure I could have ever done that. But if that's what they want to do, hey, it's their country. Why not?
So let people serve in any way that they can.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so then, you know, just for me getting to know a little bit about your role and everything, how do you feel about participating in this project? I mean, clearly you were directly involved in everything, and you know.
I am very much in awe of the Korean people. Being a Korean War veteran, I have met many people. They are very giving people. The most giving people I think I've ever seen, because they're thankful. Even though we feel we didn't do much of anything other than stop the war, but we're glad they're here. What else can I say? They're nice.
So, are you glad that, the memories of the veterans and everyone's role will be able to live on, and future generations will be able to learn
Yes,
more about it?
yes, I think that's excellent, and it's something that the younger people who haven't been through all this need to know happened, Didn't just go boom, boom, boom. It was very important to all of the Korean and American people. I think it should have been.
So, you mentioned some of the veterans that were Korean War veterans but didn't necessarily go over to Korea, or veterans that did go over and didn't necessarily fight. I have a number here that says that the U.S. government designated that there are about 7 million Korean War veterans. Now, clearly all of those were not soldiers that were fighting in the war.
Right.
What is the other roles? How do you think these other people played a role in our success or failure or whatever it might have been?
Well, I have to go by my husband, who never felt he was a Korean War veteran. During the Korean War, he was in over in I can't think of the name of the place right now. The northern part of Africa, back when it was owned by other countries. And he just knew what was going on there, and he knew nothing about the Korean War. But then there are other people who took it very seriously, very seriously. And it's good they did.
So there are a lot of people participating in indirect ways.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you said people were taking it seriously and not seriously. How about the Americans at home that were not part of the war? What was your impression, since it's kind of a gap with the soldiers, they didn't necessarily know what was going on back home while they're over in Korea fighting, but you had that perspective of how people's sentiment was towards war, or lack of sentiment.
Well, I remember one Korean War veteran, the first one ever to come back to my hometown. He, of course, wanted to be left alone. But they had these big parades and everything for him. And he was from a small town just in between Syracuse and Amsterdam. And it was a very small town, and he just wanted to forget the whole thing at that point. He had been injured badly, and it would take him a long time to get back into it. So, but it's funny too, being such a small town. It was like he was the only veteran, But I was always interested in the military.
Yeah. So do you think people in general just didn't care about what was going on, or?
Oh, I think they cared. I think they cared. Some people cared a lot, an awful lot. They gave their lives. And other people sort of half and half, Sometimes it's okay. Other times, well, my son's over there, so of course I'm interested, things like that.
So it's almost like, unless you had some attachment, like you had a child that was a son or a daughter that was involved in the war, you didn't necessarily feel that attached. You didn't really know what was going on.
Right.
So, what about your family? How did your family feel about your participation?
I was afraid to ask that question. My mother and father and sister we're all for it. If that's what I want to do it, you know. I wrote a letter to my rich aunt, and she told me that ladies did not do such things. And I wrote her a snotty little letter and said, I'm more of a lady than you'll ever be.
All right, that's good.
I said, what I wear does not say what kind of person I'm going to be, you know. But it turned out okay. I heard years later, my aunt who lived in Amsterdam where I lived said, by the way, I hear you wrote our favorite aunt a letter. One we all wanted to write, but didn't have the guts to do.
That's great.
Yes.
So people, your whole
And
family
she was a
so-
teacher, and she was a teacher, you know. And she said, that's what we all wanted. She always told us what was right and what was wrong, what we should do and what we shouldn't do. But she was my father's sister. She didn't bother with me after that.
She was probably afraid to.
I doubt that.
Well, so you're kind of starting the feminist movement right there, right?
Possibly, I guess, yes.
That's important. So I'd like to talk more about the role of women in the war and helping the cause. So you were working in the post office and helping with logistics and things like that. What are some other positions that women held?
Did
Not necessarily that you did, but women in general.
Oh, women. Well, the first thing I noticed in large numbers was women being, back then you had to have a person dial a number for everything, and the women were in charge of that. And it took a lot of people. I was shocked at that. It's one of the jobs that a lot of women tried for too, being, but that didn't interest me.
So
We all had our own jobs that we wanted to do.
yeah. And did you, for the most part, get to choose what you wanted to do, or was it kind of like you volunteer and they assign you?
Well, when I was at in the Cape where I was studying, they gave us a test, okay? And they came out and said, now you passed 150 jobs. Which one would you like? Duh. You know? No explanations, no nothing. So I said, first of all, I wanted to go to the finance place they had. Nope, it was closed, okay. So they mentioned a couple other things like driving cabs or driving jeeps for officers. That didn't interest me. A few other things. Back then I was a very shy person. Always afraid to ask questions. And so eventually I decided, well, I would go to Indianapolis to school and learn that job, you know.
The post office?
Post office. They asked me if I wanted to go to school to be an officer, and I said, sure. So then they came back, you're too young. Anything I want, you're too young. But I had to wait a couple weeks after getting out of high school because I wasn't 18 yet. So once I had my birthday, I was okay.
So then you get the officer school?
Then I could be in the service, period.
Oh, I see.
But I think my main problem was that I didn't realize I should have got a little education to help me out. But At the time I went, I felt I have to go now. I can't wait. Besides that, I didn't have any money to go to school.
So that helped your decision a little bit.
Yes, yes. But I liked what I did. I'm glad I did it.
Mhm.
And if I had to live it over again, I would do it again,
Mhm.
really.
That's great. So I'm wondering, you said there's a lot of women signing up for these jobs. Was it more of kind of that they wanted a job, just a job in life, or that they wanted a job that actually had to do with being in the military or helping the war in some way?
Well, I think it was partially helping the war in some way, but they also were looking to when they got out of service.
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to teach me something I can do afterwards?
Uh-huh. So it's training for the future
Right.
also.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because being a telephone operator back in 1951 was a big thing for women.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had thousands of them,
Yeah.
thousands.
Yeah.
And of course, secretaries and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So you said if you were younger, you'd do it again.
Yes,
You would go over there? Would you sign up to fight?
probably,
That's
probably.
that's something I wouldn't do.
Well, let's put it this way. If my 5 kids were little and they asked me if I would fight, I would probably say no. But if I didn't have my kids leaning on me, I would give my life. I'm not as I don't know. I just think when things need to be done, somebody has to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you would volunteer to do it?
I would have, if I could, if it was something I could do. Like when we went through the, during basic training, we went through this thing and they told us, now women, we've got to go to learn to shoot guns. We cannot force you to take the guns. But if you ever get anywhere and somebody hands you a gun and says you're going to use it, you are going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through the whole shebang because I couldn't see trying to defend myself or anybody else if I didn't know how to shoot a gun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most of the women just sat there and watched.
Mm.
I didn't understand that.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have kind of a more respect for these women then that are volunteering their lives to go to Afghanistan and wars that are going on today?
Do I have more respect? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Only because back in my day, they weren't given the opportunity. I don't really know. I have respect for the women that give themselves in like that. I think nothing greatness for them. It takes a lot of guts to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And some people would go for it, some wouldn't. Some would be much happier at a sit-down job, you know.
Mm-hmm. Like anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Right, even here. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever come in contact with nurses? And because we're kind of interested in their interactions with soldiers coming
Yes.
home.
Now, the nurses I met were mainly people that went overseas. I didn't know until after the war was over. It'd been over for quite a while. That most Army nurses weren't even in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
It shocked me. Some were, but the Marines took most of the jobs there.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't believe that we didn't have nurses over there, you know. I know we had a few, but very few.
Mm-hmm.
And the only Army women that were in Korea in any kind of job was very, very low. That's something I found out later too. I thought the Army did everything,
Yeah.
you know,
You learned
but
something.
there were the others too, you know.
So is that kind of frustrating that women weren't necessarily able to hold higher positions?
I think whether or not you can have a higher position depends more on you and how hard you're going to work for it. I think anyone can go up, and they just do well if they want to. If they don't want to, they don't. A lot of girls I met just went in and couldn't wait to get out. You know, for some reason they had no idea what being in the Army was like. That made no sense to me.
So, what was your impression of when a lot of the people that were serving in Korea came back over? I mean, you said that the nurses dealt with people with problems. I mean, did you kind of interact with any of the veterans that came back, whether personally or professionally?
Well, the veterans that came back and had trouble with their mail, they would come to me, or their COs would come anyway, and we would try to find out where that person was last, and did they send them to another place? Because quite often they changed. They sent you to Kazakhstan or something, and then they changed their mind and sent you to Korea, something like that. Your mail might really get mixed up. Then I had to write to the COs and try to find out where their mail might be, and sometimes I had to call back and forth. I'll call like on a piece of paper to find out just where they were, you know.
Sounds like a complicated process.
It was, but when you found somebody, it was good.
Yeah.
Felt sorry for the guys that couldn't find their mail.
Yeah. Well, that's their connection to home and to their family.
Right.
So it's really important for their morale and just kind of to get them through the war.
The thing that surprised me most about my job was when people would come. I used to have a window, but it was just a small part of my job. But these men would bring their mail and ask me if I'd read it to them. American soldiers who didn't even know how to read and write. That broke my heart.
Yeah. So what is
and
that?
It happened all the time.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah. Mostly from the South, I should say.
Yeah.
Almost always from the South. It just surprised me more than anything else, I think.
So how did that make you feel then? I mean, it's. I could see maybe one thought saying, well, how are these people becoming soldiers if they don't know how to read and write? But then again, you're saying, you might be thinking, well, these people will serve no matter what.
Right. And two, you don't have to be able to read and write to get a gun
Right.
ready.
So then what was it like reading these letters to them?
Heartbreaking. It really was. They were so important to these men, but yet they would sneak around trying to find somebody that would read to them. And then a lot of them came to my window so that I would help them out.
So it's something that they didn't want to get out.
Right. They didn't want other people to know that they were uneducated. And they weren't more black than white, no, nothing like that. It was just young Americans who hadn't had a chance to read. It's hard.
What did it mean to you to be able to read that to the letter?
Oh, that made me feel good. Also made me feel sad because I could read it to them, but what if they wanted to know later what is that, you know?
Yeah. But it must have meant a lot to them that you were available to them.
I sometimes wonder if that's why I went into becoming a teaching assistant after I got out of the service. It was many years later, but just teaching little kids who didn't know how to read and write meant a lot to me.
I'm sure that had a lot to do with it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So do you think that's one of the major impacts that your experience had on your life?
I think it probably is. Probably is.
That's really interesting. So now, because of what you saw, you realize the importance.
I worked with handicapped kids, and that really made me feel good.
Yeah.
Helping them figure out how to do things was worth it.
How do you think your perspectives on life have changed? Thinking back on your experience working in the post office and doing your job.
I think it was good for me. Very good for me. Got to see people other than my hometown people. And I know one other woman who went into the Army shortly after. She went in because I had gone in. And I met her one time when she was on leave. And she thanked me so much for leading her. And I said, I had nothing to do with it. Yes, you did, Doris. I always liked to do the things you did. And it made me feel like $1 million at that point. So I guess we all affect other people, even though we don't know it.
Well, clearly you have a powerful presence and you give off good vibes to people and they like to follow in your footsteps because you seem to make right decisions for the right reasons.
I hope so. I would like to do that.
So do you think back on your experience often?
Oh, yes. Yes. That's a part of my life.
And are you able to share your experiences with your family?
Yes. My husband was never one to join things, okay? I tried to get him to join the Korean War veteran. No, don't want to do that. So the month he died, I'm a little bit ashamed to say, I joined the Korean War veteran. And it has been so good for me. I've made good friends. I've been able to pick positives and negatives in my life, you know, a lot of different things. It's been good for me. And my oldest son, who lives with me, says to me, Mom, why didn't you tell me all this when I was younger? He said, I probably would have gone in the circles.
Right. He said, maybe that's why I didn't tell you.
No. I said, well, your father never talks about these things, so. No.
Well, I think that's really important because a lot of veterans that I've talked to say that they never shared their experiences until they became a member of the Korean War Veterans Association. And they're able to see how good they felt when they're, could talk about it.
Right. That's true. We are allowed to write to the Washington, the national, I can't think the name of the thing, but it can be a letter written today and put into this in Washington.
Okay.
It's in the main office there, and they can leave them there. And years later, their grandkids can go see what Grandpa did. It's important. It is to me.
So you mentioned that you were a shy girl growing up.
Yes, I was.
You're talking a lot, though. You don't
Yes,
seem so shy today.
I've learned how to talk.
Is that something that being in the Army helped you with, or just
I think possibly. Hmm. Yeah.
that's
I learned how to fight for what I want, you know?
that's important.
Mhm.
That's good that you realize that, I think.
Yes.
So, have you had a chance to go to Korea at all?
They have given me the chance, but I would feel like I was cheating someone who had been over there. And aside from that, I also don't have the money. But
But doesn't the association help out Korean War veterans?
they pay something like 50% or something. We were talking about it on the way over here. It would be very nice to go. I would love it. But I think the people who are there deserve it more than I.
I think it would be a nice opportunity to see what.
Oh,
'cause
definitely.
you helped out. I mean, you did your part. You're a veteran.
Right, right.
How do you feel about Korea's development?
I think South Korea is magnificent. I mean, they have rebuilt the country. They have made so many important opportunities to people of all ages in this country as well as their own. And from what I have seen of Korean people, I am in awe of them. They are so thoughtful. They are so kind. And I don't say things like this because I'm here. If I didn't believe it, I wouldn't say it. I don't give compliments when they're not in order. I'm an old woman that likes to say her, even if it's too old, ants.
Right.
Oh,
So,
dear.
what's their reaction when you say that you're a Korean War veteran?
Well, they've taken it well,
Yeah.
everybody, yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of people don't realize the
A
role that women
lot
had.
of people, like at my church for a long time, people would say, why'd you wear that jacket on Sunday, you know?
They might
Why
think it's
is
your
it?
husband's or
Yeah,
not yours.
yeah, it's funny.
Mhm.
In fact, they even have asked my son gave me a jacket that says U.S. Army. And people ask me why his mother's wearing his jacket.
Yeah.
He said, nope, that's for
That's my
her.
mother's
She
jacket."
earned it.
Uh-huh. Well, you did earn it. You definitely earned it. What do you think the legacy of Korean War veterans will be?
I hope it will go on and on. It is a great organization. I have found a lot of friends and intelligent people, you know.
Mhm.
It's good.
Do you think your role and the role of women in general during the Korean War helped kind of pave the way for women in the Army and the branches in general?
Oh, I'm sure it must have. You know, very few. When I went into the Army, the only service that would let you go anywhere out of the country was the Army. I didn't know that. And if you wanted to go other places, well, like even when I was up for leaving, they said to me, well, do you want to go someplace else? I said, I want to go outside the country. And I can't remember, there's a little island near Japan. It has a big name with service people, starts with an E. We could send there. Of course, I was just a dumb private first class and with no money. And I thought, but why would I want to go to a three and a half hour movie, you know, place and be stuck there? I didn't know until I talked to GIs later that that was a step-off place for lots of places. So it worked.
So I'm wondering, just to kind of conclude our interview, if you could maybe provide a message or two about children or adults or future generations of family who will be looking at this memorial database that we're going to be creating and checking out your interviews and the interviews of other veterans.
Well, I think we need to do everything we can to make people see that being in the service is something you're lucky to get the chance for. And you should try to enlarge upon it as much as possible. And let the people think it through. Don't let them just say Saturday morning, oh, I've got nothing to do, I think I'll go in the Army. No, that's not the way. You have to think it through. What would you do in the Army? Where would you want to go? You know, things like this. And that goes back to me, too. I didn't think it through. I could have done better, but I was waiting to be 18.
Yeah, there's not as much information back then either. It's easier to get information now.
So I hope so.
Yeah. Well, Ms. Porpiglia, I really appreciate your service and you coming down and talking to us. It's been a pleasure listening to you. Before you leave, we'd like to present you with this medal. It's the Ambassador of Peace Medal given by the government of Korea.
It's beautiful.
It is in the name of the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs.
So under the chair?
Thank you.
Let's start that over again. Okay. So, the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, as well as the Korean Veterans Association, through the government of the Republic of Korea, presents you with this medal, which is the Ambassador of Peace Medal for Korean War veterans, in recognition of your service to help their country. And if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to put it around your neck.
I would be honored.
Okay, there you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.